We're live.
We're live.
Live from New York. Live from Seattle. It's Thursday afternoon. We're gonna do The Shining. It's your friends. This is the Trace
Yep.
podcast. And we're your friends, Andrew and
Isabel.
Isabel. All right, this is our second of these that we're doing together.
It is, yeah.
Why did we pick The Shining?
I think we were talking to each other about what our second movie was going to be and what's a movie that we can just kind of like go off on.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't feel like you can't talk enough about this movie. There's always something new to digest.
It's like this is up there for most rewatchable. Just how many times?
Yeah.
Every time fresh. Every time new.
It's a pretty long movie, but at least for me, I know not everybody feels this way, but the last time I saw it was downtown at SIF, the Cinerama, and it felt like in a blink of an eye. It breezes by. The pacing is so quick, even in moments where you're really told to sit with a scene, we're prompted to the next. And that's so impressive for kind of a movie where you're in one location most of the time.
I think it's hard to quantify why The Shining is so fantastic and so rewatchable. And maybe that's part of the reason why at the time it wasn't a big success critically or with it did okay, I think, with audiences.
Well, yeah, I was looking up like the box office, and they definitely made their money back. But I think Stephen King was very vocal about not liking it.
Yes.
And I think he was telling all his friends like, this sucks. And I think a lot of people agreed. And also then the discourse and dialogue came out about how Shelley Duvall was treated on set. And so it lost a little bit of that momentum that it could have had, but it definitely made up for.
I think she was also nominated for a Razzie,
which has since ridiculous. It has since been redacted and taken away.
You just wonder what it must have just been that this movie was so different than everything else. And I'll actually name in a minute some movies that came out this year.
Yeah.
And we'll see that in terms of there's all kinds of awesome smaller movies, especially horror, that were great. But like the bigger movies, a lot of them are quite straightforward in a way that The Shining is not.
It's heartbreaking to me that she got a Razzie for this.
Well, if anyone probably wouldn't care, it doesn't seem like she was too like she cared about things like that much.
Yeah, she had enough to worry about.
And I think, is this the same year that Popeye comes out? I think it is.
I think it is.
So she's in Popeye and The Shining in the same year.
Yeah. Well, she developed that really close bond with Robin Williams during this time as well, and
who was considered as for the lead in this.
Yeah. Also, apparently, Chris Christopherson was cast, but it turned around and was changed to Jack Nicholson. Apparently, Stephen King was opposed to Jack Nicholson originally because of his roles in the past, specifically One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Stephen King was worried that audiences would go into this movie already knowing Jack Nicholson and anticipating what would happen, anticipating his fractured mental state, because he does that so well. That's most of his characters, and so he wanted somebody a little bit more, you're not sure what to expect. And I think they did that well with casting an unknown kid.
Yeah. When I saw that Chris Christopherson thing, that's such a completely different movie. But it could have been okay. I mean, it wouldn't be as awesome.
Yeah. Well, Martin Sheen was also.
Yeah.
Who else? Somebody else.
It's one of those, De Niro, I think, or something.
De Niro.
It's so obviously that this had to be Jack Nicholson that there can't be anyone else.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine anybody else.
Yeah. We will talk more about the book, but let's with these things, it's always fun to think about when you saw the film first.
Yeah.
But this one of all movies.
Yeah.
Is for so many people.
You remember when.
Exactly. Because most of us saw it when we were kids or teenagers or whatever. And that's when you should see this, by the way.
Yeah.
You should see this before you're 16. Like, probably like 14, 13.
Yeah.
When did you see it for the first time and how? What was the circumstances?
So the first time I remember seeing it was one of those movies that was always on TV. Like, you turn on the TV at night, you're flipping channels, it's always there. And so my first full viewing, it was in chunks, like a weird discombobulated mess of a couple nights throughout the week. I would turn on the TV and it would always be there. And so I remember it in vignettes, in different scenes, because that's kind of what the film is. It is a series of vignettes, a series of hauntings, and
like fragments of a dream.
Exactly. And I remember just each piece was even more terrifying than the last. And then I remember fully watching it one day in my parents' upstairs of my childhood home and just being absolutely terrified. I was with my mom watching it.
Do you know how old you were?
Oh man, probably elementary school.
Wow.
I don't remember. But it was the first time I saw a movie where it wasn't obvious. Like, I wasn't being told how to feel. I was confused and scared and excited all at once. And I was like, is this what a movie is supposed to be? And it was the first time I had ever experienced that. A movie being laid out in front of me that's a puzzle and me putting it together. And I think that's why it's my number one on Letterboxd. It's going to be the number one for the rest of my life. I think it's just absolute perfection in my eyes. What about you?
Yeah, so I loved movies and TV since I was a kid, big time. But I would say that I loved comedies like Airplane, movies like that. Yeah. I loved, the obvious things like Back to the Future, like for my age, like being a 80s kid.
Of course.
So, and then I liked, action movies and stuff. And I liked drama. I liked all kinds of movies. But the one thing is my parents didn't want me to watch horror movies. Yeah. So I didn't grow up with Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't see it till I was till I was over 30.
Wow.
Which actually was kind of awesome.
Yeah.
To be able to watch all Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Texas Chainsaw and all those films to discover them as an adult.
That's wild because I was introduced to all The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw, The Shining so early on in life.
That's usually the story that people have.
Yeah.
And I was such an obedient kid that I knew I started to get a sense of The Shining somehow. I don't know how. It must have been from seeing stuff on TV. I don't know.
A bit of shine.
Yeah. And I had my friend Alex in Mazatlan, who now whose pen name, he's an author, is Hilario Pena. Shout out my friend Alex. Still friends. We discovered all kinds of music and films together.
Okay.
And we rented this. I think my parents were going to be out of town or something.
Nice. Perfect.
And so we went to the Video Centro in Mazatlan, where I had memorized every single VHS. Anything coming and going, I knew about it. Somehow I never worked at a video store.
Yeah, that's surprising. Hey, there's still time.
It's an injustice. Yeah. So we rented it and watched it together. I think he had seen it maybe or knew about it. And we watched it. I think I was 14 probably. And it was a cinematic event in the sense, just like you're saying, like, it made me realize that movies could go somewhere. Like, I had seen a few hints of this. Like, I think I had seen Carnival of Souls, maybe.
Yeah.
Or the Twilight Zone was really the thing.
Yeah.
That would I loved the Twilight Zone. So that kind of prepared me for this. But even the Twilight Zone tends to have like a message.
Yes.
A social message. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
The Shining isn't like.
It doesn't.
No, it's not that kind of a movie. Now, it has so much to take.
There's so many messages, but the final sequence, it's a puzzle.
And this is why conspiracy theorists have
of course,
grabbed onto this movie, because there's enough to say the movie's about this, about this, about this. And I think it's fine. I think it's interesting to hear. Yeah. But to me, the movie, what it's about is how scary fathers are.
Or men in general. Yeah.
And like this pathetic weakness behind that, a certain types of masculinity that really is like absolutely pathetic. Because the movie, that another thing about this movie, the first time you see it, it's like the scariest thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then every time you watch it after, it's funnier and funnier.
There's a little bit more silly.
It's funny. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the Jack Nicholson character is a pathetic.
Well, there's like this weird little like sarcasm, like silliness in his, even the way he toys with Wendy, like the stair sequence, like Wendy, darling.
I think it's my favorite part of the movie.
It's so like tongue in cheek, like he's toying with her.
Light of my life.
Exactly. It's so dark, morbid, twisted, sad that it's a little silly.
Yeah.
And I think that is our brains trying to kind of cope with how scary and tragic that is. Like how people use comedy to deal with really tragic, intense events in their life. I think that's us unintentionally kind of laughing at the discomfort.
Well, my theory with Kubrick is that when he made Paths of Glory, he made his completely earnest, hard on its sleeve movie. And it seems to me that he must have decided, like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
And so he always uses comedy and horror after in like all of his movies, even though Lolita is like weirdly in between comedy and horror.
Well, naturally the subject matter is quite horrific, but it is a little silly.
Yeah. Then Dr. Strangelove is
the Quilty character is just hilarious.
And if people, a lot of people who even love Kubrick haven't seen Lolita.
A lot of people have seen the Adrian Lane, Jeremy Irons,
which I haven't seen that one, but
it's a little bit more true to the book in that it's a little bit, the 90s, like sexy, whatever. Ooh, she's 12.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the way to do that.
Yeah.
Movie.
Whereas the 50s, it's
like, it's 60, early 60s.
Early 60s.
Yeah. Black and white still feels 50s.
It's Sue Lyon gives this, and it makes sense because she is more grown up.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more of a seriousness in her performance, whereas in the 90s one, Dominique Swain was quite young. And so it does feel a little bit more stark with Jeremy.
That sounds, that's why I haven't watched that movie, I guess. That just doesn't sound comfortable.
It's very uncomfortable to watch.
But like Dr. Strangelove, the full like rage and humor, rage, anger, but instead of expressing it like Paths of Glory, like earnestly doing it through comedy and horror together.
Yeah.
And even Barry Lyndon, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what he made before and after. But first, just to put this into context, 1980. Here's some other films that came out. And for me, part of this is trying to figure out why were people not feeling this movie when it came out, and why is it so beloved now? So there's got to be something at the time that it didn't hit at the right time.
We are live, right?
We are live.
Okay. I think Tori's wondering how to view.
Yep.
Okay.
Here.
Here you go, Tori. There we are.
So in 1980, here's some movies.
Yeah.
The Blues Brothers.
Wait, really?
Empire Strikes Back. There you go, right?
Wow.
If you're going to see The Blues Brothers or Empire Strikes Back, both basically perfect movies.
Both perfect
but they're not The Shining.
Another perfect movie.
David Lynch, The Elephant Man.
Wow.
Now widely considered the main movie from this year, Raging Bull. De Palma's Dressed to Kill.
Wow.
The Big Red One, The Fog. Rainer Werner Fassbinder made his 16-hour TV film, Berlin Alexanderplatz. Airplane, as mentioned before.
Nice.
Alligator.
This is wow.
Coal Miner's Daughter, where Sissy Spacek, I believe, won Best Actress, and it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
Stardust Memories, where Woody Allen got his first like backlash.
Nice.
9 to 5 with Jane Fonda, Dolly Parton, and Lily Tomlin. Excellent movie.
Yeah.
And song.
Yep.
Infamous, Cruising.
Wow.
With Pacino, which has kind of gotten a reappraisal.
Wow.
I kind of like it.
What a year.
Ordinary People, which I think won Best Picture, which is a great movie. Mm-hmm. Altered States.
Okay.
Friday the 13th.
Nice.
The Changeling here in Seattle.
Some good scary movies.
Yeah. American Gigolo, Paul Schrader. Cult classic horror, Motel Hell. Urban Cowboy, Travolta.
Okay. Wow.
Popeye, Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall had quite the year.
And The Blue Lagoon. Not to mention, a million others. But
Brooke Shields shout out.
1980, right there. You're like, what's the trend? Those are so disparate.
Yeah.
Like a lot of good horror.
A lot of women in danger.
Yes. And Out of the Blue, which you couldn't even see. Yeah.
That was 1980?
Mm-hmm. Dennis Hopper, Out of the Blue. I think my number 2 movie of this year.
Dennis and Jack
probably
to talk about
after this. Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So that's some context for 80s film, 1980. And then before this, Kubrick had made
Barry Lyndon
in 75,
which was kind of a flop in the US, but a great success in Europe.
And now it's completely beloved.
Exactly.
Also a movie that's way funnier than you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And then he does Full Metal Jacket. So
he did that right after The Shining.
7 years.
But 7 years after. Movie.
Yeah, so this is where he gets.
Good for him.
He just stops making. He just slows down.
Yeah.
Because this is 3 movies in 12 years. Wow. And then he doesn't. Then all we get is Eyes Wide Shut in 99.
And then he passes away before the film is even.
Edit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So.
He really put the rest of himself, the last little bit of his soul, into those last couple movies, and you feel it.
It also seems like he was always developing projects,
mm-hmm.
and he didn't really like to leave his home,
yeah.
and he wouldn't fly or leave England or whatever, and he just liked to be with his family, and he would like talk on the phone with like friends for like hours, and so it sounds like he got to the place where working on a project, whether or not it was going to get filmed, was the enjoyment.
Yeah,
which I think is a good lesson to take. Like, there's this attitude.
Yeah.
This attitude that we all have that like, if you start an artistic project or creative idea and you don't end up putting it out or finishing it, that's some kind of failure.
Yeah. There's still so much value in the fact that you worked on it. You tried it.
Yeah. Well, we know that he was working on a Napoleon movie.
Yeah.
And we know he was working on a Holocaust movie. And we know he was working on AI. Those all, and all those movies have gotten made.
Yeah.
By other people.
Yes.
And 2 of them are wonderful. And I didn't see Ridley Scott's Napoleon.
Oh, the one that just came out with Joaquin.
Yeah,
there was a great sequence, if anyone has seen it, a great sequence of some Russian battle where they're battling on ice, like a frozen lake.
Oh.
And horses coming at each other, but the water caves in, the ice breaks, and it's this beautiful sequence of like the horses going in the water, and I loved that scene, but it was just a little, I don't know, a little strange. Vanessa Kirby played a great job being Josephine. I believe that's his mistress or wife's name. Yeah, great performances, just a little, not a whole lot of direction. That's why. That's how I think it. Anyways, whatever.
Napoleon.
Literally not worth talking about that much.
Yeah, I've never really been that interested in Napoleon, although I know he's very important.
Little weird man.
Yeah. Here, a few more things about 1980.
Yeah.
Check out all the bands that put out albums this year. Okay.
Okay. Oh, so Jimmy Carter's president.
Yes.
Okay.
Talking Heads, David Bowie, Springsteen, The Clash, Prince, Ramones, The Cure, Diana Ross, Public Image Limited, Joy Division, Bob Marley, U2, Peter Gabriel, Curtis Blow, The Pretenders, Dead Kennedys, Elvis Costello, Psychedelic Furs, Devo, AC/DC, X, Tom Waits, Motorhead, The Jam, The Birthday Party.
And my mom.
And your mom.
Yeah.
So your mom was born?
No.
Wait.
She was releasing music.
Oh, sorry.
During
I was
that
like,
time.
wait a second.
No, she was born a
Yeah,
little bit earlier.
I was gonna say, wait, I can't be older than your mom.
She was releasing music at that time and often talks about how amazing the music scene was during that time.
This is still like 75 to like 82 is my favorite.
Yeah.
Music and movies. Well, that's to get extended to 84 for Paris, Texas, and Repo Man. But anyways, so like this is like exciting.
Yeah.
Movies and music.
Yeah. The arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Some political context.
Yes. We need a little bit of political context for this movie because I think, and I hate when people are like, don't bring politics into my movies, but I think movies are political. This movie specifically. Like, I don't know if you've seen Tilda Swinton's recent speech at an awards ceremony talking about how film is a radical pushback against regime.
I mean, art's about freedom.
It is.
If you don't have, an artist will and should push back against any attempt at censorship.
Yeah.
I mean, artists have a responsibility, but
Yeah.
that does not include censorship.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So yes, Jimmy Carter's president, but at the end. So there's going to be an election and Ronald Reagan ends up winning. So we're going to go into the 80s. Most people, the opinion seems to be nowadays that Jimmy Carter kind of got treated badly.
Yeah.
And lived a very admirable life.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Although the Winter Olympics were in Lake Placid, New York. Bon Scott from AC/DC dies. This one's weird. The USA. This is when the USA hockey team beats the Soviet hockey team, and it's like this big upset. It was like, do you believe in miracles? Yes. Ironic because today is this Canada-US hockey game. And there's all this stuff going on that's like because Canada is mad at us.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Yeah.
And so we have to root for Canada, I guess.
Oh, Canada.
Tonight. I'm not going to watch the game. It's too stressful. But shout outs to my friend Lucas in LA, biggest hockey fan that I know. Carter announces a boycott of the 19 Summer Olympics because the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. And the Olympics were in the Soviet Union. Check this out. The World Health Organization, which we are no longer in because of MAGA and RFK Jr., had announced the global eradication of smallpox. But now we have an anti-vaxxer regime. So maybe smallpox will make a comeback.
Bring back smallpox.
There were race riots in Miami after 4 white police officers are acquitted of killing a black man.
Wow.
I was going through all this stuff and like for our problems,
history repeats.
Yeah. Mount St. Helens erupts here.
Oh, shit.
In Washington. Ian Curtis of Joy Division dies. Pac-Man is released.
Nice.
CNN launches first ever 24-hour news network. This is not a good
The era
thing.
of fear begins.
Yeah, this is not good.
So perfect for this movie.
Richard Pryor has his accident where he sets himself on fire. Nelson Mandela is in prison in apartheid South Africa.
Wow.
Apartheid South Africa.
Wink, wink.
I wonder
nudge,
why
nudge.
we're thinking about that. The Unabomber's doing his thing.
Let's go, Ted.
Reagan announced his nomination for president, and then he beats Carter.
Yeah.
Bad news for all of us,
Yep.
unless you're, really rich. Bad news for all working people.
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy Stratton is killed. Dorothy Stratton, who was a playmate who was in They All Laughed,
Wow.
the Bogdanovich movie,
Yeah.
and then she was killed. And then they made a movie about it, not Bogdanovich, called Star 80, which is rough.
Yeah.
Bob Fosse. But They All Laughed. It's on HBO Max. It's one of the most life-affirming, wonderful movies you will ever see.
We'll check it out.
It's the opposite of The Shining. 13, check this out. 13 people are killed and 211 injured in a right-wing terror attack in Munich, Germany.
Whoa.
A fire at the MGM Grand in Vegas kills 85 people. That'd be like the biggest story ever if that happened now.
85 people.
Led Zeppelin break up after the death of John Bonham, and John Lennon is killed.
Yep.
1980.
Wow.
That's a lot of, and there's, of course, there's like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds of Middle East stuff going
Of
on,
course.
and so maybe people wanted to just go and like watch the Blues Brothers, or The Empire Strikes Back,
or Airplane,
or Airplane, and because The Shining is like,
no wonder it flopped.
Yeah.
They don't want to see an angry man like wreaking havoc on women and children because they're already seeing that on CNN.
And the movie feels like this critique, well, because the movie is like Blue Velvet. To me, this movie is a critique of a certain type of American masculinity.
Which was 85, Blue Velvet?
86?
86, yeah, right. Whatever.
But this is similar in the sense that, like, yeah, maybe people are just don't want to face like the American evil. Because this movie, whatever, it's definitely about American evil.
This is a movie about American evil.
Yeah.
100%.
And we're going to get into all those.
What American evil means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things happening in 1980. And we know that Kubrick wanted to make the ultimate horror.
He wanted to make a horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's the story of his receptionist overhearing him in his office. Like, he had this huge stack of horror books, and every day the receptionist would hear thump against the wall of him throwing the book against the wall. And then eventually the thumping stopped. She went in there and saw he was reading The Shining.
Have you read The Shining?
I have.
The book?
I have.
When did you read it?
I read it on a road trip like a couple of years ago now. Maybe like 5 years ago.
How was it?
It's silly.
Yes.
It's a very silly, like Scooby-Doo horror.
I've read it.
Except there's a lot of themes of alcoholism and child abuse that is not spooky scary. It's more like actually scary.
Yep.
But there's a lot of the Overlook stuff is very spooky, silly.
There's like plants that move around and stuff.
The hedge mazes move, the fire hydrant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the fire, whatever, the hose.
And we know that this book was very personal to Stephen King. And the reason why he doesn't like the movie is because Kubrick doesn't want the movie to be so obviously about one thing, like alcoholism.
Yeah.
And so we don't even, does he actually drink any alcohol in this movie? Like, probably not.
Well, the bar that magically appears, he's drinking the Jack.
But it's pretty. Yeah. It seems like a fantasy, right?
Yeah. Like, is he actually drinking that? Is there?
Because in the book, I think he finds alcohol in somewhere or something, right? I read the book when I was like 16.
Oh, okay.
Just because I love the movie so much.
It's also easy to get through, in my opinion.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. As is the case with all Stephen King books, they're very easy to read. I remember reading it and being like, this is the dumbest book I've ever read. Like, this is not scary.
Yeah.
This is goofy.
The scariest stuff is the real life stuff.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I think Stephen King is like wonderful as a person, and he's come up with all these great stories, but his actual writing is just, I don't know. It's just like not for me, I guess.
And usually his takes are pretty good with like he still reviews movies and whatnot. They're pretty good. He has a couple books that I like. But his take on The Shining, and then his like 97 straight to VHS Shining, I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
It is ridiculous. If you want like a funny movie to watch, like a drinking game movie, like with a bunch of friends, that's the movie to watch.
He's great at coming up with stories. He's not good whenever he's involved in the filmmaking process.
Yeah, because he directed that one and it was not
he made that
strong.
Maximum Overdrive movie with Emilio Estevez. It sucks.
Wait, that was him?
Yes.
Crazy.
Yep. And hey, Stephen King is wonderful, but know your strengths, I guess. And it's just a losing. It's like, it's your story. That's true.
Yes.
But criticizing The Shining, the film, is just, it's just dumb.
The movie is a lot stronger than the book. because he also will probably go into it, I
Yes,
guess.
it
But
is.
will change. He changed a lot of the characters, specifically Wendy. She is a completely different person in the book, and I think this was a smart change to make.
And because it seems like Stephen King wanted this like naturalistic, showing a decent guy falling apart or something, and Kubrick knows that like movies need to be like heightened reality.
Yeah.
Not like he's not trying to make we live like Anthony Bourdain with narration. Okay. The book, the movie, tell us some stuff about some of the technical aspects of what was innovative about The Shining.
Yeah. So a little fun fact. So the creation of the Steadicam was in 1975. So
I know what the first movie is. It's Bound for Glory.
Yep.
The Hal Ashby film.
Exactly.
With the Haskell Wexler.
Yep.
Did it.
Yep. 1976.
Very good movie, by the way. It's the story of Woody Guthrie.
Yep.
Another one that we need in our time.
And the Steadicam was used extensively in Marathon Man. Also Rocky. So it started to become a pretty popular piece of film equipment. Then, so Kubrick saw this 10-minute sizzle reel, basically, that the man who invented the Steadicam, Garrett Brown, who's a cinematographer, he created a 10-minute sizzle reel, basically, like, here's the Steadicam, like, please use this.
And just so if people don't know, like the Steadicam is this thing that you wear on your body.
Yes.
And it has like a thing that keeps it balanced so it doesn't shake. Exactly. So instead of handheld, a person can carry this thing. They used to be extremely heavy.
It was typically men, and you had to be like a license,
like really have strength to move with this.
Yep.
But this was I want to say something about the innovation that this is, but keep it coming.
So it was built the way that Mr. Brown created it. It was very fixed. Now Kubrick saw this. And I'll read a little bit what's said. So The Shining prompted further Steadicam innovation when Kubrick requested that the camera shoot be barely above the floor. But that was impossible because however tall the camera operator would be how tall the Steadicam would go. But he wanted it to be close to the ground. I
just realized it's kind of like an Ozu movie.
A little bit.
Where the camera is on the ground and looking up just a little bit, except in this case, it's with movement.
He wanted it to be very low, obviously, for all those shots of Danny riding around on the big wheel, kind of to create this ode of like you're being followed, you're being watched.
And maybe putting yourself in the position of like being a child. Exactly. Which is going to get you in touch with those primal kind of fears.
Yep. So Kubrick said, hey, do this. Make it low. Garrett Brown was like, I can't. He's like, do it.
Yeah.
And he did. And you can see in a lot of behind the scenes shots of him on the film with this wacky, crazy Steadicam device, because it hadn't been finalized or patented yet, of the Steadicam being so low to the ground. And that was the first time, obviously, as we said, the Steadicam had been used in other films and was beginning to be popularized, but it wasn't until The Shining that it was more of the flexibility that Kubrick pushed. It now was able to go really low, go really high, move around in more creative angles rather than just kind of a head-on straight shot like we see in Marathon Man, in Rocky with Up the Steps. Like it's a little bit more diverse.
And Kubrick, of course, is famous for doing these innovations. Like you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey to this day, and it looks better than any science fiction movie that gets made now.
Exactly.
Barry Lyndon, famous for the photography.
Yeah.
He was always coming up with these things, and it's so unbelievably effective.
Yeah.
In this movie, I think that besides this movie, I think the other movie that's probably most famous, popularly with Steadicam, is like Goodfellas.
Yeah.
And like, especially when they go through the Copacabana, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome tool. My argument here is that this the steady cam, as by the time we get to The Shining, is the last good development in cinema.
Ooh.
That there has everything that's developed since, outside of maybe some sound stuff, has been a detriment to the quality of film.
Okay.
Certainly digital cameras, certainly green screens, certainly CGI. The worst thing that has ever happened to the cinema.
There is one shot in The Shining, one only.
Yeah.
That's a computer generated image.
Yeah.
Do you know what shot it is?
Does that have to do with the maze?
Yeah. When Jack is looking down at the fake maze, and we zoom down
so
in,
awesome.
and we see Wendy in her red jacket and Danny walking in. So it's that shot, it's fake. And then it transitions into them actually. That's the one shot.
And when you watch it, you can't tell. Like it's invisible.
You can't tell at all. Yeah.
Which, whenever people can pull off, if you can use CGI in a way that's invisible and I don't even notice it, well then great.
Yeah.
But that's not the way people are using CGI as like a creative tool. And then now with AI, it's just going to get worse, So, yeah. What's a positive development in cinema that didn't exist in the time of The Shining?
I think a lot of FX art, like what comes to mind is what they did in The Substance.
Yeah, but that was maxed out by The Thing, 1982, or Videodrome.
I think the pushing it though, the creating a literal, like an artificial person, and having it be controlled on its own. I think they.
But it's still like that. All I mean is that like that technology like existed.
Yeah.
It's just like The Substance is a really good example of it. You know what I mean? That's kind of a side thing. But that's the Steadicam stuff in this movie. When you see it for the first time, it's like so cool.
Yeah.
Following Danny on his little tricycle, whatever thing.
Yeah.
Down the halls. And also, what kid? That's like such a wish fulfillment when you're a kid to have the freedom. It's like scary, but you're also like, that would be so cool to ride all around that place with that perfect carpet.
Yep.
No obstacles. Oh yeah.
The sounds. Because Kubrick wanted that sound of the hardwood floor to carpet, back to hardwood floor. But it would have been impossible with a dolly.
Yep.
They needed Mr. Brown to be walking.
Good job, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown.
So what's The Shining about?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. What is The Shining about?
There's this really great quote that I'm going to reference. It's a quote from Mr. Kubrick himself. When asked, because obviously he was asked many times, what's the theme? What is this movie about? So Kubrick states that there is something inherently wrong with the human personality. There's an evil side to it. One of the things that horror stories can do is to show us the archetypes of the unconscious. We can see the dark side without having to confront it directly. And I think that's what The Shining is about.
And this is something that in recent years, like, did you watch any of those In Search of Darkness documentaries about 80s horror?
I didn't.
They're really, really fun. There's 3 of them. They're long, like really long. But they go over like every 80s movie you could possibly, every 80s horror movie you can imagine between the 3 of these. And altogether it's like 8 hours or something.
Nice.
But they talk a lot about horror. Why do people love horror films? And like people have come, it's much more, people have a lot more awareness now than they did in the 80s about what horror movies do for us, like psychologically, that they provide us with catharsis. It's exactly what he's saying. Like it gives us a chance to face evils, but like not directly. In other words, not in real life, like through a film, just like you had like through a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's talking about the unconscious. I mean, this is in a Freudian way, like when you dream, when you have a nightmare, that any dream is coming up from your unconscious, and it's stuff that you're repressing or trying to avoid or whatever. And so dreams are a blessing. including nightmares, because they're just bringing things that are already there.
Yeah.
That you're concerned about or whatever.
Exactly.
And movies can do horror movies.
Yeah.
Like the nightmare and the horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is why I really believe that cinema at its fullest has to be horror.
Yeah.
Or maybe a musical. Like seriously, like they do, because musicals are usually super dreamy and they're not rational.
A bit surreal.
Yes. Because movies aren't so good at capturing reality, but they're very good at capturing dreams.
Yeah.
That's why, what was Hollywood? The Dream Factory.
Yeah.
David Lynch, what does he say? Movies are dreams.
But who's the dreamer?
Who's the dreamer? That's when you get into the existential, metaphysical, mystical side, which we won't do right now. Okay, so The Shining is about the evil that we don't want to see
within man, and I think more specifically the American man, or the white man, not just American.
And you mentioned before that what about white man's burden?
Yeah, so there's the line that Jack says in the film. It's like, it's the white man's burden, which is a reference to the Kipling short story. And throughout the film, you consistently see Indigenous people's artwork scattered around the hotel. And usually the only interactions that the characters have with this artwork, at the beginning, Shelley or Wendy is very much admiring the space. It's beautiful. Whereas Jack is a little bit more, I don't know, not suspicious of it, but just a little bit more cool and like not walking through the hotel. And then we see a little bit later him playing with his tennis ball, like literally throwing his ball at the art, like hitting it. And that's the only interaction he has with it. It's this aggressive gesture.
And this grown adult white man, the people he terrorizes in this movie is his very frail wife, who
loves him.
Yeah, but is obviously having a hard time.
Yeah.
A little boy.
Yeah.
And he
a black
kills a black man in a completely like unfair. It's like shooting someone in the back.
Yeah. Also,
he doesn't fight him,
killing him right on a Indigenous rug.
And it's not, to me, the point of this is not to say like, oh, so this movie is about white privilege or something. It's more just like there's these fears that are getting tapped into based on different types of evil that, again, the movie is acknowledging. And Rudyard Kipling was a racist. He was like he had a colonialist mindset. You know, he thought that it was white man's burden to take care, I believe in this case, of people in India, as being this idea that white Europeans were higher than whoever the people they were exploiting, which is just a way of creating an ideology to excuse your disgusting behavior, which is what racism is. It's an ideology of weakness. But so when he's saying white man's burden, it's like, oh, the burden of having to take care of because I'm better.
Well,
or higher than.
Yeah.
Right. That's the white man's burden.
Even in the same scene, he refers to his wife as the old sperm bank. And then refers to it's the white man's burden. Speaking to the bartender, I believe that's what he's saying. Lloyd. It's the white man's burden, Lloyd.
Let me tell you, as a bartender, I have had people say gross things before, and pretty much every time I've been like, I've said something back. This bartender, not a good job.
Yeah.
This bartender.
Well, arguably, he might not even be real.
Well, he definitely is definitely not real. Well, unless he is a ghost, which, of course, this movie also does something, which is, this does something that I think is really cool that Lynch is good at too, which is, if you are a person that believes in angels or demons or ghosts or spirits or
souls,
whatever, yes, any of those things, and or God, whatever, these kinds of things, then you can absolutely read the movie as literal.
Yeah.
That these are the ghosts
Yeah.
from the evils that have been done by
in the hotel,
American
on the
white
land.
men.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So you can read it literally, and that these things have tapped into his unresolved.
Well, they do
shit.
say at the beginning, it's like, oh, it was an Indian burial ground. The natives were fighting against the people that were trying to construct the hotel. So you could take it in a literal sense that this hotel was built on blood. There is blood in the hotel, in the elevator. There's literal evil here.
Like these impressions stay,
yes.
right? Now, so you can read it if you from a spiritual kind of way, if you want to, or you can read it as this person is mentally ill, and it's as a material it's a purely materialist. There's no spirit, nothing. There's no ghosts, like, and that these things are just in there as symbols or something, but not as having still a reality. These injustices, these evils that have happened. And it's just like tying him in thematically to this repetition of behavior by, and again, this is not about like, oh, just like trying to virtue signal or something, but the concrete realities of evils done that can't be denied.
Well,
in this country,
the ghosts are seen by Jack and by Danny. And it is a child. And it is not until the very, very end that Wendy is shown.
And of course, the scene that most terrified me as a kid when I first saw it, because I was like, I didn't understand what that is. Now I just think it's kind of funny.
The bear dog man.
Can Jack Nicholson's character, does he have the ability to shine?
Yeah, I think
he does. It does, right?
Because it's genetic. Well, if you watched the terrible film Dr. Sleep starring Ewan McGregor, they get into the genetics of shining.
That movie, there's an example of why all the things that I was saying before about movies getting worse. Technically,
the movie
because that movie just is not good looking at all. Ewan McGregor's a wonderful actor. But the movie, I think I gave it 2.5 stars. Like I didn't think it was terrible.
Almost walked out of the theater.
Like it.
It was cool to see kind of the recreation of the Overlook, and we're back in the Overlook, and they recreated the sets, and it was beautifully done, really impressive, the work that the team did on that. But I just thought it was just a little silly and a little much.
Also, who wanted that? I don't.
Well, they wrote the book. He wrote Dr. Sleep as a literal.
Well, I'm sure that Stephen King wants it.
He did,
because he wants to reclaim.
He did.
The Shining.
He was a producer.
It's like anybody can read the book.
Just watch the movie again and think critically.
Well,
you don't need to have another movie like returning to the universe. You can have the universe within you.
The one thing, talking about Blue Velvet again here, is we got a real villain.
Yes.
We've got a villain.
We have a scary person.
And just like the Lynch film, you can interpret a demonic aspect, or you could just say it's just a scary man. A scary dad.
Yikes. The scariest.
A scary husband.
Oh, God.
Or if you're not a white person, a scary white guy. So you can read it either way.
All equally scary.
And knowing Kubrick, well, it's interesting that he mentioned in that thing, that line about the unconscious. I'm sure he was into psychoanalysis stuff, at least somewhat. People tend to talk about Kubrick as if he is atheist. I don't know. I don't know. But even if he is, which what's important about the movie is that he leaves room for anyone to watch it by not answering too many questions. He gives you room so that your fear has room to project onto this guy.
Exactly. Your fear of ghosts, your fear of men, your fear of
accountability for the past.
Literally any sort of fear can manifest and be equally as scary, because he doesn't, I mean, there are continuity errors of the ghosts, so it's not perfect and exact, because well, there is what's the whole Mr. Grady.
Yeah.
His name changed. His name changes at the beginning when he's introduced, and then later Charles at the beginning, and then Delbert, right, or vice versa. So there's a little bit of the puzzle pieces don't fit perfectly, and I think that leaves room for our fear to fill.
And I think I've read that Kubrick was impacted by Halloween, which would make sense on a few levels. One, the use of the Steadicam, which it's something specific that they used. I can't remember the name. I can't remember what it's called, but there was a specific type of Steadicam that Carpenter loved and he would use all the time. I can't remember the name of it, but it's unique, and it's one of the things that makes the Halloween, which was the other movie we discussed for this, so awesome. But in Halloween, Mike Myers never says anything, has no clear motives.
Mike Myers.
Yeah.
I've never
heard the SNL thing.
I've never heard him described as Mike before.
Michael Myers. We never hear him talk. He has no motivation. He doesn't torture.
Yeah.
Weirdly, not sadistic. Simply kill.
He's just a little like he's just in that. Whose face is that?
It's William Shatner.
William Shatner mask. It's just very like there's no motive that's obvious. He's just the scary masculine figure that will stop at nothing.
And you, the viewer, what this allows for is it allows for the viewer to project whatever you find potentially scary about this. You can do that. There's other films that make more really specific villains, like Freddy Krueger is very, very specific.
Yeah.
This feels to me like in between the two, where Jack Nicholson's character obviously says lots of things, and we have a sense of some of his motives and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's still enough mystery
that
you can never completely pin down.
He's also very
is it mental illness or is it?
He's unpredictable. You don't know what is going to set him off. You don't know if he is safe. And there's some scenes where he's typing and writing in some of the common spaces, and Wendy comes in like smiling, expecting that she's going to be received by her husband, but he snaps at her.
Yep.
And so we see that she has or views him in some safe light, or there is a little bit of there's not fear yet.
It does seem like we must be seeing him at his worst from the beginning, kind of.
Or she's just so deep in this quote unquote toxic, abusive relationship. I mean, we learned from the very beginning, just through hearsay, that he broke Danny's arm.
Yeah. When he was drunk.
Yes. And never touched it again. Never touched the bottle again or whatever. But in my theory, and from reading the book and whatnot, I think there's a little bit of child abuse there, sexual abuse.
That had happened to him or that he had done?
That it happened to Jack when he was young, and then he's repeating the cycle to Danny.
That brings us back to Fire Walk with Me again. This repetition of abuse.
Of evil. Like, what is the worst thing a man can do?
Yeah, abuse your child.
Abuse your child, beat your wife, kill someone. Like, what is evil? You know?
All those things.
What is evil but the bad things that men do?
And of course, everyone's capable of evil. Obviously, but this movie is specific.
Yes.
About what type of evil we're talking about.
Exactly.
And yeah, we got to talk about Shelley Duvall here.
Yeah.
In a second, but I want to say something about Kubrick. There is this idea. You mentioned that there's some continuity errors, right?
Well, the windows that don't exist, like the office, when you go into that office, that window shouldn't be there. The light shining in. We're in the middle of the hotel. There's no way there's some air shaft or something. It doesn't make sense.
And so I like that you point that out, because there's this idea that Kubrick is controlling and a perfectionist.
Yeah.
I think that this idea is true and false. We know that Kubrick would spend huge amounts of time in pre-production.
Well, the chairs that are in there's a famous story of him, like, the I'm literally blanking on the movie, but him wanting the chair to be a certain color, but the film is in black and white. So
Yeah.
they're like, it won't matter. But he's like, no, I'll know.
Yeah.
I'll know that it matters. I'm the one that'll know.
Yeah.
You're the only person that's gonna know. But that's the most important thing, that I'll know. That it's a green chair instead of a red chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So he spends huge amounts of time in pre-production, and then he spends a long time filming.
Yes.
And of course,
Take after
famously,
take after
many
take.
takes. Yes.
Yes.
He always goes over schedule.
He keeps his crew small, though, so he's able to do that.
Yes, that's right. This idea that if he's doing 100 takes of like Jack walking into a room or whatever it is, like some little thing, I think when people say that that is controlling or perfectionist, I think that's actually the wrong way of seeing it. What it actually is this openness to looking for something in the moment, something that you don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, you have all this preparation and knowledge and technical know-how.
Yeah.
But then once you're filming with the actors, now you're looking for something, and the actor could even be like, "What is it? What do you want me to do differently?" And he'd be like, "I don't know. Just do it again." Mm. So in other words, he's looking for something that he doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, is really important in understanding like what movies are about, which is, of course, you want to have all this know-how and preparation, but then it's about the reality of the moment that you're filming, and that you're looking for something that ineffable,
that it will come.
And when you look at the results, they're all there.
Yeah.
And they're surprising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you watch this movie, you're just like surprised over and over.
Yeah.
Not just by the filmmaking, but the choices that the actors are making. And
yes.
Stuff.
Yeah. The dynamics that are developing off camera, but we are beginning to see captured in the film. Like what happened to Shelley.
Which leads us exactly to that.
Yes.
So this is Shelley Duvall in this movie, like the movie, her performance in the movie has evolved like the narrative about, we know she had a hard time.
Yeah.
She says, I saw an interview with her from later in the 80s where she was saying that this was the best movie experience of her life.
Yeah.
So this idea that she was pushed.
Yeah.
Yes. Emotionally.
Yes.
And it sounds like Kubrick sometimes would be kind of like terse with her.
You can hear it even in behind the scenes footage, like the way he would be speaking to her is stern.
And be like, you're holding everybody up. We're all out in the snow. Like,
yeah.
And but to tell this story as an abusive story, I don't think is correct. Basically.
Of Kubrick and Duvall. Yeah.
It's these performances. You'll hear lots of actors like Isabella Johnny in Possession, Cheryl Lee in Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah.
We could name male actors too.
Yeah.
But in this case, these performances, you can understand why they wouldn't necessarily want to repeat them.
Yeah. Or return to that world or that mindset.
But knowing that they did something that they probably never could have imagined.
That they were pushed to that point. Yeah.
And actors, Francis Ford Coppola tells the story of in Apocalypse Now, when they're shooting the scene where at the beginning where Martin Sheen is like drunk and having a breakdown and all that. And, and Martin Sheen punches the glass and he's bleeding everywhere and he doesn't cut.
Yep.
And I think at some point, even Martin Sheen told him, don't cut or something and Coppola talks about how like regular people don't really understand that actors want to experience something new and they want to do something great that's like remembered.
Yes.
Is Shelley Duvall remembered for this performance?
Yeah.
Hell fucking yeah, she is.
Yeah.
And if in fact, to me, outside of the filmmaking, she's the best part of this movie.
Yeah, agreed. She's the heart, she's the soul. Well, what is a mother than the beating heart of a family? Like, and she is the beating heart in this hotel that is, well, if we want to go literal, she turns the boilers on. She moves around the hotel. That's her job that she's tasked with, to heat different parts of the hotel. She brings the warmth to this cold, dead place.
She also does all the work.
Exactly.
All he does is sit around and play with his ball. And then later on, of course, we realize that he's really not working.
Man.
Because writing is work.
Yeah, but what was he writing?
He's not writing.
Yeah.
He's using this as an excuse.
Yeah.
To blame everybody else for his problems. Clearly.
Classic.
Yes. I thought too, like Shelley Duvall, I don't believe she ever really like studied acting. Because
what did she do right before this?
Oh, before this, top of my head, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But she had done all these Altman movies, obviously.
Yeah, Three Women. Yep.
And he met her at a party.
Yeah.
Altman. She wasn't an actor.
Yeah.
And he was, obviously she's like
striking.
Incredible looking.
Yeah.
And was like, hey, you want to like have you ever done any acting? And she's like, no. It's like, do you want to be in a movie? She's like, I don't know. And he ends up putting her in, I think Brewster McCloud was the first one she was in. And then she's everywhere in the 70s, not just Altman. She's everywhere.
She has the look.
And obviously Popeye is Altman movie. Weirdly, everybody says that Popeye was a disaster. It actually made money.
Really?
Yeah. It's just unbelievably strange, weird. Way weirder than The Shining.
I mean, the concept, Popeye and olive oil, it's
she's
weird.
Perfect.
She is. She is olive oil.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally. So I wonder if, like, because actors that do the method or whatever, the system, like do that type of training, they learn who's actor studio. They learn how to bring all of their emotions and everything.
Yeah.
But they also learn how to deal with that. And I don't know if she ever, she wasn't trained like that.
No.
And so
she wasn't trained to have those boundaries.
And maybe that makes the performance even better. Or maybe if she had some of those skills, maybe she could have done it and it not had, suffered.
Yes.
Because she had like a breakdown or something.
Well, her hair there's that clip of her like holding her hair up to and being like, my hair's falling out. And she's like running, and Kubrick says something along the lines like, well, if you brush your hair that much, of course your hair is going to fall out, kind of thing. Just, it's like kind of.
There's also a long history in the movies of directors treating actors differently, knowing what you need to get out. Like John Ford would famously make fun of John Wayne all the time in front of everybody and say how pathetic he was because he didn't actually volunteer in World War II, whereas John Ford did and Jimmy Stewart did and all these people, and telling John Wayne that he was basically a fake, a poser,
like not a real cowboy.
Yes. But he was also probably doing it to get stuff out of him because a lot of directors are kind of manipulators.
A little bit of that pushing to see what we can get next.
David Lynch famous for not doing this and not liking this kind of all the things people want to say about Woody Allen he never did that at all.
He did a lot of stuff though.
He wouldn't even really he just tell the actors, I hired you, so you know how to do it, so just go ahead. But Kubrick was involved. And I'm sure, I know that makes people uncomfortable these days.
Well, also the script would change day to day, hour by hour. Notoriously, like I watched this interesting short documentary about the making of The Shining, and you can see scattered around the set, there are scripts that are different colors. And you hear the best girl talk about, who is now the script supervisor, but at the time, best girl. You see her talking about like, okay, so everyone have their pink script today. Like this is the newest edition. And Jack is being like, oh, I still have the green. And she's like, oh, I'll get you the pink. And he was like, I read this all night, the green, like, when did it change? And she's like, oh, it just did. Huh. And so the script is changing constantly and evolving. And it's, I don't think it's as you were saying before, like a controller, he's doing it intentionally. I think it's the film is it's a living thing. It's evolving and changing, and it's in flux.
It's a being present with, because whatever the film is to you, the film, the director or whatever in your head, as soon as you're working with real people, not just the actors, the entire crew, you are all doing a collective creation.
Yeah.
And a director obviously needs to be open to the moment.
Yeah.
Because art is still about the moment.
Yes.
The inspiration in the moment with those people, just like a band.
Yeah.
You know, what comes out is you can't, and the directors that try to control all of that, like with the death grip.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right way to go.
That's not possible. We're dealing with a lot of people with real emotions and real idiosyncratic behaviors. Like, you just kind of have to let it go sometimes.
And what we're going to be left with is those actors on the screen photographed by this person and lit by these people in these specific locations. And then we have Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, these real people in the moment. And some of those scenes, like you already mentioned, the scene when she finds out that he's not writing.
Yes, she's like turning page after page after page.
And he shows up and they have the whole thing and the stairs and the bat.
Yes.
And you then were left with this. I don't know how many times they did that take. I think they did it a lot.
A lot. Well, you can see it in their eyes, but the final take on film, like Shelley Duvall looks exhausted. Jack looks exhausted because he probably had to start that tumble and then fill in with a stunt double.
Yeah.
Like over and over and over again to get fake knocked out.
Yeah.
And then dragged to the freezer.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And Shelley looks tired.
And there's some things that, and you'll hear the stories about the things that actors will do to get ready for a scene or whatever. Yeah. And in this case, there's parts in the making of, which Kubrick's daughter.
I think so.
I think maybe
she was the on-set photographer.
You can see these scenes where Jack is like jumping up and down.
And he's saying, murder, murder, kill, kill, rape, murder, kill. He's saying to himself. And then you see Shelley walking around with her knife being just like, where's I need my like makeup, just walking around. So he's just this weird clusterfuck. And then them trying to like tape like where the focus will be pulled. It's just it's chaos.
It's a being in the moment.
Yeah. Well, you know, Jack Nicholson, when he was younger, he worked as a volunteer firefighter. And so the axe scene, that's not in the book. And it was actually Jack Nicholson, if I believe correctly, it was Jack Nicholson that brought it to Kubrick. Or Kubrick bringing it to Jack, being like, hey, I know you were a firefighter at one point. You know how to properly swing an axe and use an axe. And they incorporated that into the script because he knows his way around an axe.
And you can tell.
Oh, yeah.
You can't even imagine this movie without that scene.
Here's Johnny.
And those things that where the camera follows the head of the axe.
But then you see it kind of shake when it's hitting the door.
Awesome.
The camera operator literally going, and then literally the shake.
You can just see that they made every perfect choice. The angle when we see her with the knife and the axe coming through, and it's just weirdly, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yep. And then you hear the snow cat coming in with Dick Hallorann.
Yes.
Coming in. And it's at the perfect time right before Jack's going to reach his hand in and we're saved. And she's able to sneak out.
And Dick Hallorann, of course, with the ultimate apartment.
Yeah.
The ultimate master bedroom.
Yep.
When I was a kid, that was another one where you're just like.
There's a lot of nudity in this movie. You see the elderly woman in the tub. You see the young woman also in the tub. And you see the two nudes in Hallorann's apartment.
Yeah. And we see, is this the first time in a Kubrick movie where we're going to see this type of woman that is in Eyes Wide Shut everywhere, which is this like almost alien, like tall, skinny, but like buxom.
Yes.
Like this kind of almost like an alien woman.
It was almost, that was the standard of beauty at the time. Like this very thin, athletic, svelte, buxom woman.
It's very particular. Like it's some like body type.
Yeah.
archetype thing or something that feels, again, the only word I can think of is like alien. Like it's not like what normal people look like.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he has these women in Eyes Wide Shut too. I don't really know what that is.
Beauty standard.
Beauty standard?
I think so.
I get a sense that there's something more sinister about the shape.
What do you mean?
I don't know. It just feels that way to me. I don't know.
Mm.
Like something unnatural. Like
yeah.
You know? I don't have a whole theory of that or anything. That was another one. First time seeing it, when it's the old lady and the flesh is rotting off. You're just like, oh my God.
You believe Jack Nicholson's like excitement when he sees the young woman, because just knowing Jack Nicholson, he was like, hell yeah, I'll grope a naked, fully nude woman on set.
Yes.
And then when she switches to that old lady who's just coming after you, like you believe his fear. His reaction of just like walking backwards like this is very reminiscent of how Danny is looking, that he's viewing the whole thing through Shining, and he's making the same face. Right. He's just kind of like they're both doing that weird Shine stim face.
What's the part when is that when Jack Nicholson like starts crying? Is that where it happens? Is it after that? I think he's like, I don't know what's wrong. There's a moment.
Oh no, he's dreaming. No,
he dreamt that he killed them.
Yeah, so
he starts crying.
He fell asleep at his desk, and he's screaming in his sleep, and he's going, oh, and Wendy comes in and goes like, oh, it was just a dream, like, and he falls off his chair, and she wakes him up, and he's like, I dreamt that I killed you all. Yeah.
But it kind of feels like this moment where, so maybe that happens, and then he goes to that room. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. The point is, we get this scene where his character seems to be aware that he's not doing well, that he needs help.
Yeah.
And that's this moment where
he embraces the unwell.
He refuses to
literally
just stay with his, that's right.
Yeah.
He won't stay in that place of like, I need help.
Yeah.
And his refusal to do that leads to, that's why he has to then double down on everything.
Yeah.
And do all because he can't just be like, I need help.
He's going to fully
which again
embrace
comes
the
back
evil.
to this like understanding of masculinity that can't apologize or acknowledge a need for help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Feels like important that's in there.
Yeah.
A scene when you see him vulnerable.
Yes.
And weak.
Well, he's crying and like spitting up, and he's like a baby. Yeah. The way that he's being comforted.
And she treats him like
a baby.
A mother.
Yes. Yes.
He could probably he can only understand women as like mothers or sex objects.
Well, it's what's the term? It's like the Madonna versus
Madonna whore.
Yeah.
Complex.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is literally right now, the whole MAGA movement is like only sees women that way.
Yeah. Well, we see it a lot in the movie, even though the young lady versus the old quote unquote hag, the witch who's like laughing. It's like, it's one or the other. And even like this, we could go on a whole tangent about all of the symbolism of the film that furthers my belief that there is themes of sexual abuse within the film, of Jack towards Danny, and it maybe even Wendy, but I think it's more so Danny. We never really see Jack like be like incredibly affectionate towards his
the
wife.
One scene, with his wife.
Yeah. No. It's only like he refers to her as my darling or honey. Like it's always a little bit of that Jack Nicholson sarcasm. Like it's like he doesn't quite believe that he is attracted to his wife or like loves his wife. But we definitely see like when him and Wendy are being shown the living quarters, we see two workers going down the stairs, and then Wendy, Jack, and Miss Stuart Ullman are like walking up, and we see these two ladies leaving, and we see the last shot is like Jack like looking back at them, like kind of like checking them out. There's two like blonde women that are pretty similar to the lady in the tub.
There you go.
There's also a scene at the beginning where Jack is waiting to be shown the tour and to go into Stuart Ullman's office. We see him reading a magazine, waiting. If you zoom in, the magazine is a porno magazine.
Is it like Playboy or something?
Yes, there's a nude woman on the front.
That's where his mind is at.
Yeah, and it's there's this, and even just how Shelley Duvall is a beautiful woman, but she almost herself has this alien nature about her.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast to the blonde woman in the tub, or the ideal quote unquote standard of beauty.
And if you look at another thing about Kubrick, if you don't know much about Kubrick, you might be surprised to learn that basically he hung out with his family.
Yeah.
He was married to the same woman for 40
He was a family man.
Years. His kids love him.
Yeah.
He was a good friend to people. Like this, he was abrasive. If you ever heard, like, with interview, and he barely did any interviews.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much you're gonna find if you go on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
But he was supposed to be pretty funny.
And he originally studied photography.
That's right.
He wasn't originally a filmmaker. He was a photographer.
Yep. Interesting. David Lynch comes via painting.
Yeah.
And he comes through photography. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. Can you pick a favorite scene
in the movie?
Yeah.
Oh man. Probably the staircase scene.
I think so too.
I like that scene a lot. I love what both of them are doing. The kind of ridiculous nature of their interaction.
Because it is kind of funny.
Yes.
In a very, very dark way.
I like any scene where Jack is speaking to the ghosts.
Yeah.
Specifically when he's put in the walk-in and he's pulled in there. It's not the fridge that he's pulled into. It's like the dry goods storage.
Yep.
But he's pulled in there and then he's looking at the reflective surface and talking to Grady.
Yep.
On the other side. I like that scene.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that the staircase scene, but that whole thing opens up with her finding the manuscript with the repeated phrase.
Yes.
And then
he pops out.
And we know, uh-oh, this is bad.
With the bat.
Yeah.
He pops out. Yeah.
And this whole, the whole sequence leading up to the stairs and then finally her hitting him, I think it's the peak of the, even though the axe scene is so off, but because basically from this moment on, the movie is a slow burn.
Yeah.
And now it's all right.
Once you see her in the green overalls and her little white socks, shit's about to hit the fan. All right. And he's in his iconic red jacket. It's all right, we know, here we go. It's about to get crazy.
Jack Nicholson's career after this is when he starts doing a lot of smaller parts.
Yeah.
In movies, like in Reds, like in Terms of Endearment.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the 70s, he was the lead in everything he was in.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And it's still between this and The Last Detail are my two favorites things he ever did. And The Last Detail might be my favorite for him, his performance.
Yeah.
But The Shining, like you said, I don't know. I can't really pick a movie above The Shining, but it's in a tier with
S tier.
Yeah, the highest, Well, let's see. It's time to get into last thoughts.
Yeah.
About we've kind of been talking about it already in terms of the legacy of the movie, but I would say more, where does The Shining fit in into horror movies?
Yeah.
And an influence on horror movies.
Well, it's a movie about ghosts, but not really about ghosts. It's ghosts aren't. I wrote down this quote from a reviewer. Here we go. This is from James Berardellinelli. Excuse me for the pronunciation, but Kubrick is telling a story with ghosts, but it isn't a ghost story because the ghosts may not be present in any sense at all, except as visions experienced by Jack or Danny. Ebert also says, quote, that the movie is not about ghosts, but about madness and the energies it sets loose in an isolated situation primed to magnify them. Ebert didn't really like the movie.
I think he gave it 3 stars or something.
And then back to the reviewer, James, he notes that King would have us believe that the hotel is haunted. Kubrick is less definitive in the interpretations he offers. He dubs the film a failure as a ghost story, but brilliant as a study of madness and the unreliable narrator.
Because the ghosts, whether you take the ghosts literally or symbolically,
they're not really scary.
Well, and they don't make him do anything. Like normally in a haunted house movie, the ghosts are doing things to terrorize everyone.
It isn't until
but it's all via him.
Yes. It is until the very end that the hotel opens itself up to Shelley, and she's running around with her bat. I believe it's the bat. And like she goes into the gold room and there's the skeletons everywhere. And it's the hotel is like, here I am, and we're getting the sound effects of the ooh, ooh, ah, the chanting almost.
Yeah.
And the hotel is like, here, we're scary, haunted house.
Could it be that like when real blood, because the idea of it being on an Indian burial ground, native people's burial ground, and once he kills Dick Halloran, is there something like the blood sacrifice like opens up?
Yeah, I could see that.
The fullness
to
everyone, not just Jack and Danny.
It's we're feeding the hotel in a way. Like there is a sacrifice to the hotel. The hotel is feeding off of this death.
And we should just say, what are like some of the conspiracy theories about this movie? Like that it's about the Apollo landing.
Oh, that it's about the Holocaust.
Yes.
That it's about the genocide of the American Indian.
Yes. Overtly referenced.
Yes.
In the movie.
Allegory for sexual assault, sexual violence.
Did you ever watch that Room 287?
Yeah.
I think I saw it, but it kind of just...
Yeah, it's a poorly constructed documentary, but it does introduce some really interesting concepts that if anybody is interested in critical like film analysis, but almost in a silly conspiratory way, highly recommend. It's like Room 237.
Yeah. I honestly, for people that are very analytical that watch a Kubrick movie or a Lynch movie, I feel bad for you. Because you can't watch the film that way.
Yeah.
Like, certainly the details are important.
You can in time.
Well, that's what makes them rewatchable.
Yeah.
Because of the ambiguity that's there, so that when you watch it again, like, for example, this in Blue Velvet, side note.
I think we might need to do Blue Velvet.
Well, of course. But, like, there's something that I had never realized because I was talking about it with Dylan, my kid, I think. And that at the end of Blue Velvet, Jack Nance is at the house for the barbecue.
Yeah.
I somehow never picked this up, which is like, that's a fantasy. That is not real.
No.
You know what's happening there.
Yeah.
So like, you don't need to know that to notice that.
Yeah.
I hadn't, if I did notice it, it didn't register to me as important until this. And I was like, oh my God, that's like actually really important to understanding the ending. Mm-hmm. When I say understanding, of course, I mean like intuitive.
Well, the robins did come back. So it's the good and
while
evil.
Eating insect, which is the other clue that you're like. But but for people, the details here are great in terms of why it's rewatchable. If you want to look for, this is a real ghost story.
Yeah.
Or if you want to look for, this is about alcoholism.
Yeah.
Or if you want to look for, this is about
the genocide of the American Indians.
Yes. And the most obvious one, which is the violence
against women.
Yeah. Against women and children. Like the violent father figure.
Yes.
Who in this movie, it's important that he's white because the white, this is specifically about what white men in America have done to women and children and marginalized people. Like, I don't think you can skip out on that.
Well, the one black character is brutally murdered in the middle of the hotel,
and he's like the most like sweet.
Well, he also shines.
In the movie.
He also has the ability.
And that scene is really nice when they're talking together.
The ice cream scene where he's eating ice cream and has ice cream all over his mouth, and Dick is talking about how his mother was like, or he described Shining as like burnt toast. And how spirits are like burnt toast. They linger in the air a little bit a while after.
And whatever one thinks about the concept of ghosts, whether they actually exist in some way or not, the idea of the ghost is that when evil and suffering happens, that there's something left behind.
Yes.
That's just true.
Yeah.
Like whether or not there's like a spiritual entity reality to that is its own thing that I make no judgments on at all. I have no idea. But what I know is that the idea of ghosts is important.
Yeah.
Just like the ideas of vampires or zombies.
Yeah.
Or like, why do we know? Because they exist across cultures and across time.
In different ways.
So you can't explain it culturally.
Yeah.
It's something from whatever the core of human experience is.
Yes.
Ghosts have seemingly always been.
It's deeply human. What is a ghost? But just a human who's no longer with us.
And because also, even if you're just looking at it from like a Marxist, like historical materialism kind of way, even that where there certainly in that view, there's no such thing as a ghost or anything spiritual, but the remnants of the reality of the past are always with us because of the material conditions that change. Like those things stay with us.
Yeah.
So however you look at it, it's, again, I think one of the reasons why the movie resonates as much now, because these things are just universal human problems and concerns.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that hotel's full of ghosts.
And this country is full of ghosts.
Yeah. And I like that in the film, we don't see like an indigenous person running around like...
Oh, that would have been horrible.
Horrible. And we do maybe see hear them because there's a lot of, in the sound design, there's a lot of chanting and calling. Maybe that's a little bit of an ode to the quote unquote Indian burial ground they reference at the beginning. But I like that we don't see all of the ghosts. We see Grady, we see the twins who aren't, at the beginning, Ullman says, oh, they're about 8 and 9. So they're siblings, they're not twins, but then we see them and they look like twins. So that's another continuity thing that I find interesting. But we see the twins, we see all the people attending the party, the bartender.
And the party is all, and we see the picture at the end, it's all white people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that Jack is right there in the middle. It's like, oh, why didn't they notice that he was there at the beginning? Like, they've been in this hotel for months and they didn't notice that Jack was in this photograph. But also that pushes the fear of the scariest things are right under our noses all along.
Yep, that's right.
And it's on the 4th of July, so it's this American holiday of American imperialism. It's just, it's, as we said at the very beginning of this is the kind of movie where if anyone asks me what my favorite movie is and I say The Shining and they say why, I can just go off because there's so much to it. There's so many layers. There's so many kind of kooky conspiracy theories that you can go in, like the Apollo landing. But there's also some that have a lot of merit.
Which is why we keep rewatching this movie and why we'll talk about this movie for the rest of our lives.
Yep.
Both movies we've done so far, when we get to the end, we're like, well, we just got started.
Yeah, literally. We could just go on and on. Each conspiracy theory. Yeah.
It's so fun to hang out with you, with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have our next one picked out, but
it might be Blue Velvet.
It'll be soon. It'll be soon, though. Isabel, it's so fun doing these with you.
Always a pleasure.
Go watch The Shining, everybody.
Yeah, or rewatch it, because you probably have seen it, but it was probably when you were young, and you need to revisit it.